Hi everyone, I'm Shelly from There's No Place Like Home at redheadmom8.wordpress.com. I just got done recording another video, and in that video I mentioned how I wasn't really sure what topic I was going to talk about because I have a few things going on in my head right now, which happens a lot. But some of the things that I actually mentioned in the video that I just recorded really gave me the urge to just get this other video done right away because it's something that we really need to talk about, and it's something that people need to hear. And that is this: our societal collapse was orchestrated and aided by government schooling. If you've been here before, you know that I talk about government schooling, compulsory schooling, a lot. You know that I'm no fan of it. You know that I have been studying up on its history probably for about 8 years now, largely in part to John Taylor Gatto, but he actually opened the doors to me checking into other things, so many other things that I never imagined that I was going to be looking into. And, something hit me the other day. And, I can't say that it's something that I've never thought about before. It's something that I've known for quite some time, but I don't think that it had as much of an impact on me as when I was kind of reflecting on the things that our society is going through right now. Here in the US and abroad, it's not even just in the US. Things are in chaos. There is no sense of moral uprightness anymore. Everything is kind of wishy-washy. There's some crazy stuff going on everywhere. Everywhere you turn, you have these insane things happening that people of a couple hundred years ago would never have stood for. And, I'll get into that a little bit later, but I was pondering this as I started thinking about pre-compulsory schooling and post-compulsory schooling. Now I'll just give you a quick history of compulsory schooling. I have so many videos on it that I'm not going to really get too much into it now. I'll just really talk about the things that are the most important. But when compulsory schooling was instituted, it was during the Industrial Revolution. And the reason that compulsory schooling was actually started was not to educate. That was the premise that they gave the citizens. The government was being, they were being philanthropists. They were being generous. They were going to provide their citizens with an excellent free education. But the fact is that that is not what compulsory schooling was started for. Compulsory schooling was started because people like John D. Rockefeller, they needed people to work in their factories. And before compulsory schooling was ever started, people were very self-sufficient. Sovereignty was the name of the game then, and they never would have stood for the government telling them what to do. They just knew how to do everything for themselves. They were entrepreneurs, and they had a real sense of community so that they were able to, thrive in that way. And unfortunately, that wasn't good for the Industrial Revolution, because who wants to go in and work for someone else in a factory when you have your own thriving family business right on your homestead? And that was a problem. So what ended up happening was the government decided to enforce compulsory schooling, where parents had to send their children to school each day under the threat of arrest if they did not send their kids. And this isn't something that they took lightly. Nowadays people are just like, take my kids, just take my kids, because it's just free babysitting, to people nowadays. In those days, though, people wanted their kids home with them because they knew that the family was supposed to be central. They actually fought, with guns to keep their kids home with them. And unfortunately, in the long run, that didn't happen. Kids had to go to school. And so what ended up happening was, we often talk about the Prussian model of education where, and we did, our education system was built on the Prussian model, which was basically it was about indoctrination. It was about training obedient workers who would do what they were told and who wouldn't question anything. And so a lot of people do know about that aspect of schooling, that it was built on the Prussian model. What a lot of people, I bet, don't know, and I'm rereading John Taylor Gatto's The Underground History of American Education right now. So I'm rereading it for the third time. And, I read something that for some reason I didn't pick up on the last time, but our education system is actually also it was also influenced by the Indian education system. Now, not Native American that I'm speaking of. I'm speaking of India, of the Indian system that was going on at the time. And that system of schooling in India was to basically train the citizens for the caste system that they had going on there. That is something that is very much alive in our school system today. We might not call it the caste system, but it's happening. We even have a quote. I think it was by Woodrow Wilson. I'm going to see if I can find it and maybe post it at the end of the video, or at least maybe on my Instagram. But there's a post or a quote by Woodrow Wilson, former president, where he was basically saying that there is only going to be a small elite percentage of people who are given a liberal education, and that the majority of people are just going to be trained more or less to be the drones of society. And he didn't say it that way, but that's what it meant. So we have a small elite group of people who are getting an actual true education, not indoctrination. They know what's really going on. I'm sure there's some indoctrination going on there, but they're not being trained to be worker bees. They are being trained to be in charge. The rest of us are being trained to be those drones, to be those worker bees. And so what the people in school were being taught, was just how to listen to what you're told, how to do boring, menial tasks every single day, how to be able to drop one thing and move on to something else at the sound of a bell. Sounds an awful lot like a factory, doesn't it? They don't call it the factory school model for nothing. They don't call it the assembly line learning for nothing. There's a reason that it's called that. That is what it was for. It was for getting this whole idea of individuality and independence out of these people, and it was about ingraining in them getting them so used to being told what to do that they wouldn't even question it. So what happened was, when these people were put in these schools, they no longer knew the life skills that their family members generations before them had known. They weren't home to learn these things. So over time, this wasn't something that was immediate, but over time, the people who were the children and then turned into adults who were taken out of these schools, they lost all of those skills that were keeping them sovereign, that were keeping them independent, that were keeping them self-sufficient. And they were growing more and more dependent on the industries that came out of the Industrial Revolution, out of those factories, out of the goods and services that were being produced there. That was another benefit of having all of these people in schools and no longer able to take care of themselves, because now they also had consumers. A great way to fight overproduction is to make sure that you have people who always need to buy your services. If people don't know how to take care of themselves, they have to find someone else who can do it and who can provide the things that they need. And that's what happened. So fast forward a few decades, and we have people like Horace Mann. He and John Dewey. And John Dewey is just regarded as this amazing mentor, this amazing, man who needs to be put on a pedestal for all the great things that he did for school. He is probably one of the worst people in the history of school, if you don't count all of the industrialists who kind of threw everyone under the bus from the beginning. But, you have people like John Dewey, and not just him, but their goal, after they had these people trained and used to being told what to do, and you already have like a consumer driven society, so that wasn't needed to be worried about anymore. Now they want religion out of the homes. What better way to do that than to impose secular humanist thinking into the school system? And there's so much information out there about these people who signed the Humanist Manifesto. Now, I've got to point out that secular humanism is a religion. It was ruled a religion by the Supreme Court. I don't remember what year it was off the top of my head. It is a religion, but it is being taught in the schools. John Dewey was a signer of the Humanist Manifesto. There are some quotes going around by Charles F. Potter, who was also a signer of the Humanist Manifesto. And they were all basically about how if we have kids in school for 6-7 hours a day, what good is an hour of church or Sunday school every week going to do when they have, 35 hours a week of humanist-driven agendas being pounded into them? So that then you have those things being brought into the school system. And then what ended up happening was they took prayer out of school. So prayer left school. And you probably think, well, separation of church and state, so prayer shouldn't have been in school to begin with. And that is something that really, it depends on who you ask, but I'm not going to get into that. What I am going to get into, though, is that was the beginning. That was the beginning of when the moral ambiguity began to be creeping into our schools. Now, I talked about how this was orchestrated, right? Well, let's think about this. There are people who are in charge, no doubt. Okay, you might hear references to the deep state. You might hear references to the elite, the cabal. Some people even say the Illuminati. I don't know. But there are people who are behind what we see going on in our government and the world's governments. And one thing that they know is that people who are less intelligent and who don't have a sense of stability are easier to control. So what ended up happening then? So we have prayer taken out of school, and then we have the Rockefellers, remember the Rockefellers back from the industrial age? Well, yeah, Rockefellers then, they started pushing women's lib. Why did they push women's lib? They pushed women's lib for two reasons. Because they wanted to be able to tax, in theory, double the amount of people, because you would have more people in the workforce if both husbands and wives were at work every day. But they also, and probably more so is my guess, they wanted the decline of the family to be a real thing, because like it or not, the stable God's model of the family with husband, wife, and children, he knows what he's doing. And if you do not have that stability, I'm not saying that it's impossible to have, a good foundation, but it makes it really, really hard to have a good foundation if you don't have that, the whole familial roles being played out of, mom, dad, kids, the nuclear family. Moms were kind of pushed out of the home. They were encouraged to leave the house, told that it isn't worth it to be a stay-at-home mom, and they're worth more than that, and they shouldn't just be the slaves of their husbands, and they don't just belong in the kitchen. And for some reason, they didn't stop to think that they were going out in the workforce and were basically being slaves of other people, like their employers, and leaving their families behind. But yeah, I always have to add my little 2 cents in there. But well, that's just how I am. So these moms, they left their homes, and kids very often became latchkey kids. They didn't have anyone raising them, mom or dad. And so here begins this spiral into delinquency for children. And just the fact that moral foundation, the foundations that used to be taught in the home and are now being, just degraded by the school system, and now they don't even have that at home anymore because their parents are, divorce rate, by the way, is on the rise. Okay, after women's lib happened, divorce rate skyrockets, and we have this a society that no longer has that foundation that was so important to keeping order in society. And, you know, as time has gone on, it's only gotten worse. It has gotten worse and worse and worse throughout the years. And, you know, you have to think about this. Think about the things that are being taught in school nowadays. They are, you know, they've taken prayer out of schools, but, you know, you have drag queen story hour. You have children being taught that there are 100 different genders. You have children being taught that they can choose whether they are boys or girls. You have pre-kindergartners who are basically being taught sex education. These things would have never happened decades ago. Decades ago, even though at this point they already had their kids in school, there was still this moral foundation that we seem to have lost nowadays, but they wouldn't have stood for it. But as society has degraded over time, we have gotten to the point where people, generations of people have now been in the school system. They have had that humanism being shoved down their throats. They have had the lack of morals being shoved down their throats. And you have had the fact that families were once together and parents are no longer raising their own children. Children are not being raised by their parents. Parents don't know how to be parents. A lot of people no longer have that bond because they are not with their children enough in order to know how to be parents, in order to how to take care of them, in order to have the patience that they need with their children. That is all gone because kids are taken out of the home and put in these schools every single day. So you don't have anyone to fight back anymore, because along with all of these moral issues being pushed on people, now on top of that, you have the fact that common sense is no longer a thing when it comes to school. The things that they are teaching in school, there is a complete lack of critical thinking, and they don't even encourage it anymore. They want children only to believe what they are told, and they don't want people to think for themselves. This is aided and abetted by people like Google and YouTube and Pinterest and so many other people who are censoring truth. This is a huge collaboration. This is collusion, okay? This is all happening. And, you know, so if you look at the things that are going on, again, it would have never happened decades ago, but it's at the point now where people don't have common sense anymore. They don't have morals anymore. They honestly have no idea of the difference between right and wrong anymore. And you know what? The elite love this. This is probably what they have been waiting for, because what is the goal of the elite? The goal of the elite is globalism. The goal of the elite is the New World Order. Yes, that New World Order that you heard George H.W. Bush talking about so often. They want that to happen. And what is it that they always say? Order out of chaos. I think it's pretty safe to say that we've got chaos going on around us right now. I mentioned, you know, the drag queen story hours and all the weird stuff going on at school, and the teacher pedophiles. And then we have this whole climate stuff going on with the girl from Sweden. And, you know, just it's absolute chaos that is going on right now. And it is the perfect opportunity for the elite to kind of step in with their globalism and become the answer to the problem that they themselves have created. So when I hear people defending school, when I hear people trying to point out the fact that not all schools are bad, I'm so beyond listening to that. Because if you truly believe that, then you honestly don't know what school is all about. You don't know what school is for, and you don't know how badly school has injured our society, has injured our families, and has injured our children. You need to think about this. You need to open up your eyes, and you need to get your kids out of school. Anyway, that's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, you can give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one over on Instagram, because YouTube always disables my comments, probably because of videos like this. And if you like my work, you can check out my Patreon page and see what rewards I have for my patrons there. And I do want to give a shout out to another Patreon patron today, and I want to say thank you so much to Autumn. You are the best. Thank you so much for your encouragement. Thank you so much for your support. And I always love hearing from you. And you know what, guys? I love hearing from all of you, and I hope you have a great day.